Rear Admiral Gayle Shaffer earned a Bachelor of Science from the University of South Alabama and a Doctor of Dental Medicine degree from the University of Alabama School of Dentistry. She earned a certificate in comprehensive dentistry from the Naval Postgraduate Dental School and holds a Master's in Health Sciences from George Washington University. She received her commission as an ensign in 1989. Her staff assignments include Assistant Deputy Chief, Medical Operations, U.S. Navy Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, Director, Health Services, Headquarters Marine Corps, and Medical Officer of the Marine Corps, Deputy Chief Operations, Plans and Readiness, U.S. Navy Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, and 38th Chief of the Navy Dental Corps. Shaffer began serving as the Navy Deputy Surgeon General and Deputy Chief, U.S. Navy Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, February 28, 2020. Shaffer's awards are a result of being surrounded by incredible shipmates, and they include the Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, and various unit and campaign awards.
Hello, I'm Admiral Bruce Gillingham. Welcome to the second edition of our Dive In series, where we examine issues of diversity, inclusion, value, and equity. Today, I'm really thrilled to have our Deputy Surgeon General, Rear Admiral Gayle Shaffer, with us today. Gayle, thanks for being here. We'd like to talk about the topic of a seat at the table, the benefits of gender-inclusive leadership. And certainly you're an exemplar of that, so I'm very interested to see your thoughts and hear your thoughts on this topic. We know there's really no shortage of qualified women to fill leadership positions. Women make up more than half of the U.S. labor force and approximately 46% of Navy medicine, 41% of our medical department officers, and 32% of our medical enlisted force, and a full 60% of our civilian corps. Yet, despite these percentages, women remain underrepresented in our leadership positions and within C-level executive suites across corporate America and in Navy medicine. So Gayle, I'd be interested in your thoughts on how do we get after the issue of creating opportunity for those talented and exceptional women that we have in our ranks.
Well, thanks, SG. I'm very appreciative to be here today to have this discussion with you. Certainly, you know, over the last 31 years of active service for me, I would say that, you know, I've seen tremendous change in just the Navy in general. In my lifetime, I never thought I would see women on submarines, and you know, we are making strides. I do think we do have a ways to go. When you look at, particularly in some of the senior ranks, we don't have that many women. But you know, I think if we take a look behind us, in front of us, and we bring people along that perhaps don't look like us, don't sound like us, don't have the same backgrounds as we do, and we make a concerted effort to bring them to the table, that we will continue to get better and better as we go along. When I first came into the Navy, the Dental Corps still had not had a female 06 selected, and that was not until 1992. And so when I first came on active duty, I'm looking around, and the highest ranking female I saw at Great Lakes was one female commander in the Dental Corps. And then a year later, we had 2 females selected to 06. But it was a reflection of dental school at the time. In my dental school class, we had 50 students, and there were 5 women.
So even an orthopod knows that's only about 10%.
10%,
yeah.
not many. And what's changing, and what I saw firsthand this past weekend when I was privileged to do the commencement remarks at the school in which I graduated from 31 years ago, that the class was more than 60% women. And it was a very diverse class when it comes to ethnic backgrounds. And so it was really amazing to see that. And so we're starting to see that being reflected in the Dental Corps and in our other corps as the flavor changes out in the civilian community within the schools.
Wow. Well, the school must be incredibly proud of you. I think you told me earlier you're the only flag officer that they're aware of having graduated.
There's a lot of colonels, retired colonels from the Army and Air Force that teach there, but they were all making a comment, you're our first star.
Wow,
So,
that's impressive.
Yeah, it was fun.
So let's break that down a little bit. So you come in, and there's very few role models for you, and so how did you seek out mentorship in that very target poor environment? I mean, how did you get your leg up in terms of understanding a way forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. For probably the first 12 years of my career, I had, with the exception of one female, they were all male mentors, but I was fortunate. They took great care of me. You know, they brought me along, particularly as I became a brand new lieutenant commander, taught me how to write fit rep, you know, how to write an award, how to go for different jobs, and helped get me where I needed to go, helped me with residency, those types of things. Early on in my career, after I finished my first privileging tour, I went to a ship, and at that time, women were not allowed to be on combatants. And so I was on a destroyer tender that had about 1,200 crew, and we had 8 women in the wardroom on the ship.
Wow.
Now, fortunately, the senior female officer was a supply corps officer, and I'll just give you an example of, you know, just kind of how I watched her kind of maneuver through a very male-dominated, you know, ship, and I really, although she probably didn't sit and physically mentor me, you know, like where we just had conversations, it was interesting to watch how she kind of made her way through. And so I learned early on, we were going to go to have a hail and farewell. We were on deployment. We were going to go to Rota, and they were going to go into the Spanish O Club, and they do a hail and farewell. And so back then, we didn't have email. You know, we didn't have cell phones. So the way they got the word out was they just put flyers out on the wardroom table. And so I remember going in there, and the flyer said attire was coat and tie. Because they hadn't had women on ships for very long. And so she, as the senior female, called all 8 women together and said, here's what I want you to do. We're not going to make a big deal out of this because it was not intentional, but I want you to go borrow a coat and tie from the men. And so we all borrowed coat and ties, and it's one of my all-time favorite pictures in the Navy. It's probably in a box in my house somewhere, but we all went to the O Club together in coat and tie. And when we walked in, the men were all like, what are you doing? And we said, well, the flyer said coat and tie. And they said, oh, really? You know, like, oh, sorry, you know, but we had fun with it, and we didn't make a big deal. And so.
But you still made a statement.
We still made a statement. And from then on, the flyers never said coat and tie. You know, it just, they were more inclusive of women. And then if you also, you know, I can tell you, though, that we also had a situation on the ship where the command master chief made a very derogatory comment about the women in the wardroom in front of the chief's mess. And that word got back up to all of us, and I know our senior female immediately went to the executive officer and said, listen, we really can't tolerate, you know, this type of, you know, behavior, language, etc. And I think he owes every one of the females an apology in the wardroom. And so he was made to apologize to everyone. I think nowadays in the Navy, if somebody in a senior leadership position made something, you know, that type of comment, they would probably be relieved because it was very derogatory. And it was, you know, just, you know, somebody in that position should know right from wrong and not do those type of things. And so I quickly learned as a young lieutenant when you need to make a big deal out of something and not just look the other way and ignore it, but also, you know, when do you not need to maybe make a big deal out of it and try to understand that it was not intentional.
So it sounds like the supply corps officer was quite a role model.
Very much so. And
you learned a lot by observing.
I did, the 2 years I was on the ship. And then fast forward 20-some years later, I didn't realize it, but we were both waiting on an appointment, medical appointment at Walter Reed, and we kept looking at each other, and I finally said to her, you look familiar to me, because she was in civilian clothes, and she introduced herself, and I said, oh my gosh, you were my suppo on the ship, and then we started reminiscing, but I don't know if she really realized how much she influenced women at that time because there were so few. But she was truly a role model on really how to do things the right way, to maneuver through, you know, a man's world at that particular time. And she was a real trailblazer in my mind, and it was really nice to be able to see her again.
Oh, that's terrific you had that. So not a dentist, but
Not
a
dentist,
female
but
officer
female
that you
officer
you could emulate.
Yes, sir.
So I want to drill down a little bit, step back a bit, because so you were in an environment where you didn't, until the ship, you didn't have many female mentors or role models, but you mentioned that male senior officers, or at least those senior to you, stepped in. And so a lot of nuts and bolts, this is how you go about it. How did they help you see the broader picture? How did you see that there was perhaps a future in leadership?
Well, you know, so many times when I think we doubt ourselves, they pushed me in a direction and said, you know, you can go do that. Really? You think I can do that? Yes, you should do that. And they advocated, you know, for me. I remember even in residency, when I was getting ready to graduate, I was supposed to go take a job as the director of the dental clinic in Itsugi. And then it came back that to me from the detailer that the CO, who happened to headquartered in Yokosuka, had somebody else in mind that was already over there. And the director of my program and one of the other program faculty got on the phone and actually called the CO over there and advocated on my behalf to be able to go take that job and not go to just a regular staff job in Yokosuka, because they knew that if I got into the big dental clinic over there without a leadership position, I would probably get lost, you know, and that this would provide me an ability to actually have a leadership position and go and do a utilization tour after my residency. So I was very fortunate, and again, these were men, you know, so I think, you know, for women, it's not about, well, they have to be female, they have to look like I do. There are great mentors out there that are men that, you know, come from different backgrounds, and you just have to take advantage of that. And it has to be somebody you kind of connect with, I think, have the same values and that type of thing. But I would not be where I am today were it not for many, many great men, you know, naval officers that have mentored me along the way. More men than women, quite frankly.
Wow, that's terrific. So clearly they saw some strengths in you. They saw some things in you that made them want to advocate for you. So historically, women have not been as forthcoming about kind of pushing in and being recognized. Were there some things that perhaps you did, or, you know, to indicate to them that you were ready for larger responsibility, you were ready for that leadership position?
Well, the thing I would tell women right now is whenever any kind of opportunity becomes available, don't doubt yourself and don't second guess yourself. Raise your hand. You may not always get the position or the job that you want, but people will take notice and you may surprise yourself. And so I think oftentimes as women, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy because we, you know, and I'll give you just an example of mine. So when I was a program director at Bethesda back in the day, the director of surgical services sent out an email, and he had 2 staff corps officers per corps on the email. So he had 2 dentists, 2 medical corps, etc. And he said, I'm looking for somebody who's interested in being the OIC of EMF Djibouti. And I called my husband and I said, you know, it's not that I want to deploy and leave you, but I'm really interested in doing this. I also told my husband I didn't think I was the most qualified and would probably not be selected, but I wanted to make sure he was okay if I put my name in the hat. And he said, of course. So I sent an email back to the director and said, I'd like to be considered. He said, great, I'm sending your name to contingency. And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. That meant, congratulations, thanks for volunteering, you're going. So what that told me was he probably wouldn't have put my name on that email if he didn't think those 8 people that were on that email could go and do that job. But there I was sitting there doubting, kind of second guessing. And so I think the bottom line is, if you don't have other people pushing you out of your comfort zone, you need to just force yourself to get out of your comfort zone, because that's going to help you be successful. And that's really kind of what I learned early on from some of those really wonderful male mentors that I've had, and as a matter of fact have stayed in contact with throughout the years as they've retired and moved on.
So nothing ventured, nothing gained.
That's exactly right, sir.
Yeah. And also embedded in that is not having a fear of failure. If you're going to fail fast, fail forward is kind of the technology phrase that we've learned. Do you have an example of that?
Well, I think I have learned the most by my failures. I think it makes you better. I mean, we don't want to fail all the time, but and I can give you another example of when I should have done better, and I really learned from it. But I was an XO for Captain Moulton at the time in Okinawa, and we had just gone through a typhoon, and we had been up all night, and we were doing a hot wash the next day, and we had a civilian who was an emergency, our emergency manager, and I asked a question, and he basically said, "I don't know," and I kind of snapped at him in front of a room full of people, of directors, and said, "Well, then why do I have you here? Why are you here exactly?" And the second it came out of my mouth, I'm like, well, that was totally wrong and inappropriate. He and I may have had a conversation, but it should have been a private, not in front of a room full of people. So when I finished the meeting, I went in and immediately told the CO what I had done and that I wasn't very proud of myself. And then what I did was called him in and apologized and told him that I was wrong. And then I called every single director in one at a time and said, you need to learn from my mistake, my failure. I don't want you to be that type of leader that, is going to, censure in public, right? It's praise in public, censure in private. And I didn't do that day. And being tired is not a good reason or an excuse to act that way. So I wanted to make sure they knew. And a lot of them would say, well, but we're not really sure what he does, and he kind of had it coming. And I said, well, that's beside the point. He and I should have had that conversation in my office with the door closed, not in a room full of people where I embarrass him.
So that's really demonstrating that mutual respect that we continually seek, is that environment where we can all excel.
Yes, sir. And I think that's where it goes to, having inclusion and equity. All of it starts with respect and how we treat each other, right? And so I just, I think sometimes we can learn bad things from leaders and we can learn good things from leaders. And at that particular moment, I just wanted to make sure if any of those directors went on to other type of leadership jobs, that they didn't think it was appropriate to do that type of thing.
Oh, that's impressive. Good for you. I've certainly been in that same situation, and to remediate it, to make it right, is important.
And I felt terrible too. Yeah. The gentleman quit the next day.
Is that right?
That's how bad.
Oh,
I mean, you know. And when you're on the island of Okinawa, you don't have a lot of resources. It's not like you're going to just turn around and hire somebody to go into that. So I really failed that day, and I've been better for it since. I wish I, had done better that day, but
I suspect those that you told, all of your directors, are better as a result.
I hope so. I hope, it's like learn from my mistake and don't repeat what I did. So that was what I hope they got from it.
So unfortunately, we're about to have to say goodbye to you as you retire after your 31-year amazing career. How would you say we are? What's your assessment of where we are now versus where we were when you came in?
We're way better than we were when I first came in. There's no question about that. I remember going to my first duty station, and I didn't even have a locker room where I could change into scrubs. So, and I shared an office with 5 guys, and so I had to go find a place to change. You know, it just was, you know, they just weren't used to women. I was the only female in the entire department. And so it was a funny story, though. There was a nice retired Navy nurse who ran the oral surgery department. And she said, I have this closet. It's nice and big. You can walk in there, just pull the little pull chain light, and you can go in and change into scrubs. One time I'm in there and she brought a patient in to do their H&P and I'm stuck in the closet. And I'm like, I have got to get out. I've got things to do. So I finally just took a deep breath and I just, hello, sorry to interrupt. I got to get, and I walked out and the patient's just sitting there like, what was that? You know, sorry, Miss W, I got to go. But yeah, so I just remember stuff like that. But, you know, like I said, we didn't have, we'd never had a female 06 in the dental corps. It was very different. And now that we have women on combatants, we have them on submarines, we're doing much better. But I don't think we can ever be complacent to say, oh, well, you know, we're good on diversity and equity and inclusion. And I do think we have to put our money where our mouth is. You know, I've said for a long time and told folks that I've mentored, you've got to bring people along that don't necessarily look like you, sound like you, and that because we need diversity to make the organization stronger. I think one of our senior leaders said it best recently when he was worried about a couple of recent intelligence failures that we had, you know, concerning Afghanistan and Ukraine, and wanted to know, out of all of those intelligence folks, was there anybody there that thought differently, that may have seen what was really going to happen? And if so, what made them think that way? Because, you know, those are the things that make us stronger and better, not just within the medical department, but in the entire DOD, if you will. But we've got to have a diverse thought, diverse population. So I think it's about a week and a half, I get to go talk and meet with some summer interns that are going to be with Navy medicine that are coming from the historically black colleges and universities. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be important that we show them opportunities that they could have within the medical department and bring them along, because, you know, they're very qualified and they will help, certainly, if they decide to come into the Navy, strengthen our organization.
So as a part of your legacy as you leave, opening doors, expanding apertures for the future of Navy medicine.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to being able to do that.
Great. Well, thanks for doing that. Now, this is not supposed to be an interrogation, so do you have any thoughts or questions for me?
Well, I do. Would you mind if I look at my card?
Yeah, certainly.
So I guess, sir, what would be some of the qualities that you look for in a future leader, and why?
I think there are a number of them, but when it comes down to selecting among candidates, I'm always looking for selflessness. Is that person seeking the position for personal aggrandizement, or is this something they're trying to do for the organization? And in other words, are they really all in for what we're trying to do? So that's important, because I think a component of that is humility, and I love the phrase that humility isn't thinking less of yourself; it's thinking of yourself less. And in my experience, the leaders that have done best are all in for the organization. If there's any accolades, or they tend to put those to their team, and they're really after exemplifying the values and the goals of the organization.
Well, that just sums you up right there, sir. So I think that's.
Well, I hope so.
I think that's amazing, and I would tend to agree 100% that, you know, that if it's not about you, you know, when you get to this level, it just should not be about you. You're there to take care of others and make sure that, I love it when you see people step to the rear when a good job needs to be rewarded, and let their sailors be able to step forward and take the credit, because you and I know, without our staffs and all the people that support us, you're only as good as the people around you.
That's right. Yeah, and absolutely. So that Jim Collins, from good to great, that level 5 leader, that's just a very interesting paradoxic mix of absolute determination the organization's going to succeed, but that humility that we talked about.
Oh, no, that's outstanding. So is there anything you do in your personal time that helps you be a better leader? And I think I might know the answer to this.
Yeah,
but,
well, I think everybody knows I'm an avid reader. So I like reading history, I like reading biography, and that gives me a lot of background for how to approach things. But I think people would be surprised that I read a lot of fiction. And I have found that really valuable in understanding context and background for people who are not like me. And so I would just, if I would offer any advice, and I do to all the junior officers when I meet with them, read voraciously. And it doesn't have to be curriculum, although we want you to do well in your chosen area and specialty, you've got to devote the time. But in that discretionary reading, reading about great leaders, reading about great organizations, reading fiction to understand, variety of backgrounds and contexts.
No, that's fantastic. And so as a leader of what some might call a male-dominated organization, and we are getting better, though, I will tell you, it's not as male-dominated as it used to be. What efforts are you employing to help increase gender parity?
Well, I hope that today's session will be helpful and will inspire some of our lieutenant dental officers to see that, yeah, there is a long-term future in the organization, that there really isn't a glass ceiling. So am I doing everything I can to remove artificial barriers? I think the more that we can, well, we like to be in a meritocracy, but in some cases, have we provided all of the opportunity, like many of your mentors and advocates? So am I advocating where I need to for people who have potential, who have that determination to make us better? So that's ongoing. I think that's the work of leadership at all levels of our organization. Have we reached out? Have we identified folks? For me, I was happily doing pediatric orthopedics out at Naval Medical Center, San Diego, when my department head said, "Have you thought about pursuing any leadership opportunities?" And frankly, I hadn't, and I just thought that would take away from my clinical expertise. But I found that it actually enhanced it, and that I was able to have an impact on the organization. So anyway, am I doing all that I can to identify people and their strengths and put them in a place they can succeed?
Yeah, and that should be the message to everybody out there at whatever level they sit at within the organization. It's important to bring people along. I always try to think, okay, who's going to be my replacement? At
Right.
every step of your career, who can come up and replace me, and bring them along and help them succeed.
So Admiral Shaffer, as you come to the end of your Navy career, thank you for all that you've done for Navy medicine. Thank you for being here today. I think this was a valuable conversation. I hope that our viewers gain some insights as to how they can not only improve their own careers, but for those around them. So thank you for your insights, and again, your dedicated service not only to Navy medicine, but to our nation.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity today.